back to another episode of Vlogs of History. I'm your host, Darius Cousin, and building on last week, this week we're going to talk about the Great Depression. If you've missed last week's episode, make sure to check it out. I'll leave a link right here. We've talked about the Roaring 20s, the decade of economic prosperity that was stopped by the Great Depression. You're also going to learn about the events that led up to the crash of 1929 that started the Great Depression. So let's get to it. During the 1920s, life was great. The economy was doing well, people were optimistic, and the consumer industry was booming. Nobody wanted the decade to end, and quite frankly, nobody should. It was a great decade to live in. Things seemed perfect, and for a while, they actually were. It wasn't until late 1929 when the economy hit a normal and natural recession that things started to shake a little. The problem was that the industries were producing less because of less demand from the consumers, while the stocks of those industries, they were going up. When something like this happens, we actually call it a bubble, which means that the stock prices are actually much higher than what the industry is worth. And what happens when you have a bubble? Well, it usually pops, and that's exactly what happened. The bubble popped, and on October 29th, 1929, the market crashed big time. A record number of stocks and shares were sold that day, causing the prices to go down dramatically. People panicked, and a lot of investors had bought stocks on margin, which means with borrowed money, and their stocks went down, so they were in huge debt. Consumer confidence in the markets dropped, causing people to buy less and causing producers and firms to actually produce less because there wasn't that much demand. This caused production to slow down, and when you have a slow production, you have to fire people because you just don't need that many people to actually work. For those who actually were lucky enough to keep their jobs, the wages dropped because there wasn't high demand and their buying power actually decreased. A lot of people had bought many things on credit because the economy was so good that people were just lending out money, and when this crash happened and nobody had money, a lot of people were in debt actually, and a lot of foreclosures happened and repossessions. This wasn't a very good thing for the economy to happen. Despite President Hoover reassuring the people that this was just a temporary thing and it was gonna pass, things got worse over the next 3 years. In 1930, there was about 4 million Americans that were unemployed. By 1931, just 1 year later, there were 2 million more, a total of 6 million unemployed. The country's industrial production was cut in half. Homeless people and soup kitchens actually became a lot more prominent in cities and towns. It got so bad that even the farmers, they couldn't afford to actually harvest their crops anymore. They had to abandon them, causing a lot of people to die from starvation. The banks, they also did not do too well during the Great Depression. People were afraid of losing their money because they just didn't believe in banks being able to safely keep their money anymore. With a lot of people wanting their money in cash, the banks had to liquidate all their loans very quickly. It's important to know that when you have such a big panic, banks really do struggle to provide the money for the people. You see, a bank actually does not keep all your money in the bank. It actually lends it out to other people, and when you come to collect, it doesn't always have the money ready to be given to you. And when you have so many people coming to get their money from the bank all at once, the bank can't always give everybody's money. They just don't have it. Usually that causes banks to go bankrupt, and that's exactly what happened during the Great Depression. President Hoover, who was a Republican, believed that the government should not intervene too much in the economy, and that it was not the government's responsibility to provide jobs for the people. You can imagine that it kind of wasn't a popular belief during those times. In 1932, when the Depression was in full effect with over 50 million people unemployed, Franklin D. Roosevelt won the presidency in an overwhelming election. He projected a very calm energy and a lot of optimism, famously declaring that the only thing that we should fear is fear itself. He took action as soon as he got into office. He ordered every single bank to be closed for 4 days, calling this the bank holiday, so that Congress could pass a legislation that would help better the situation. He also began addressing people directly via the radio with messages of encouragement and comfort. Remember that during the 1920s, the radio had become very popular and a lot of people had a radio in their homes. He thought that through direct communication with the people, he could decrease the panic and increase their confidence. It worked. During his 100 days in office, he passed a lot of legislation to stabilize the industrial and agricultural industries. He also created the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or FDIC, which has a role of protecting the people when they put their money in banks should the bank go bankrupt. He also created the Securities and Exchange Commission, which was to regulate the stock market to prevent abuse, such as what had happened in 1929. Because a lot of countries had their money backed by gold, this allowed the depression to spread throughout the whole world. Panic and hardships actually fueled extremist political movements such as Adolf Hitler's Nazi regimes. Germany's aggression leading to the start of World War II, even though the United States did not actually participate at first, they did prepare for it. The United States turned to improving their military even though they weren't actually participating in the war. With the attack of Pearl Harbor in 1941, America was officially in the war and they started pumping a lot of money into production. The widespread increase in production actually decreased unemployment levels because, well, more people had work and helped the economy in overall. The government dumped a lot of money in developing weapons of war, which kickstarted the industrial economy. And when people have jobs, well, they have money to spend on goods and services which other companies are able to produce now, which gets more companies to hire more people, which then have more money to buy more things, and that's how you get the economy rolling again. What was once a very severe depression had been halted and actually reversed because of the war. That was probably the only positive thing that came out of this war. Alright, that was it for this week's episode of Vlogs of History. I really do hope you've enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave a like, share it to a friend, and subscribe to be notified when the next episode comes out. Remember, these episodes come out every single Monday, and if you missed the previous one, you can check it out right here. Make sure you do, it's very interesting. Also, I do have another show called Vlogs of History After Hours that comes out every single Wednesday, so make sure to check that out too. As always, I'm your host, Darius Cousin. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I will see you all next week.